Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nihongo Master podcast. I'm your host Azra, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. For this episode, I have a very special guest, Taylor Dondich. He is the founder of Nihongo Master. Taylor founded Nihongo Master in late 2011 after taking a trip to Japan. After studying with various materials available to him to prepare for his trip, he came back wanting to build a better tool for not only himself, but for others to learn as well. Welcome to the show, Taylor.
Azra, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited as well. How are you? Pretty good?
I'm fantastic. It's wonderful here in Las Vegas. It's beautiful, so it's a gorgeous day.
That's great. It's really great. It's really lovely here in Japan as well. Right, so let's get into the interview questions. First off, what's your background? Take us through the journey of how this all began.
Wow. So I guess it begins when I was a wee boy in the mid 90s. When I was going to high school, I started getting interested in Japanese media. That would be Japanese animation, Japanese manga, Japanese music. And during that time, internet wasn't like fully accessible, so there was no way to like just immediately get access to all the anime and music I would ever want. So I remember just traveling to little shops in Las Vegas, trying to find whatever I could find. And so there wasn't a lot, but I managed to get kind of acquainted with some of the old school Japanese animation, like Ranma 1/2, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and things like that. It really piqued my interest to the point where I really wanted to kind of learn this language. Now, when I was listening to the music, it was great, but I didn't really understand the words. When I was watching Japanese animation, I would listen with subtitles, but it was hard to kind of relate the language to the words. And so I wanted to learn more. And so I worked with the principal of my high school and collaborated with her and actually worked with her to hire a Japanese instructor for our high school. And so I managed to get a Japanese class in there and joined that, managed that for the last 2 years of high school. And we, had a Japanese club and everything like that. It was great. And, I as time went by, as with learning any language, if you don't practice it, you forget everything, right?
Yeah.
And skip forward maybe 10 years, well, actually like 15 years into my adult life, I did have the opportunity finally to take a trip to Japan, something I always wanted to do, but I realized I forgot all my Japanese.
Oh no.
And so I went ahead and started gathering some tools around me to kind of self-study and relearn the language. And so I used online dictionaries, books, tried out different programs that are readily available. I don't want to mention any of our competitors here, but I used them all, and did manage to relearn most of what I forgot. Went to Japan, had a wonderful time, lots of great experiences, wonderful people. And came back, and that's basically where it all started. When I came back, the trip was done, but I realized there was still more to learn.
I see. You said that you started like a Japanese class at your high school. How?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I actually managed to get I convinced the principal, because I kind of helped out the high school, and the principal says, well, I kind of owe you a favor. And I said, I got the perfect favor. I want you to hire a Japanese teacher. And so I managed to get other students to say that they were also interested, to the point where they hired a Japanese instructor. And mind you, none of the schools in Nevada had a Japanese instructor, so we were one of the very first high schools.
That's really cool. Did you guys manage to hire like a Japanese teacher?
So she isn't a Japanese native, but she was very fantastic at the Japanese language. She was fluent. Her name is Brishia Sensei, and I owe a lot of how Nihongo Master started, just remembering all of her lessons and how she kind of approached teaching Japanese.
That's very cool. So more or less how you started Nihongo Master was based on your Japanese sensei back then.
Yes, I took a lot of the ways that she taught in the class and kind of tried to incorporate into how we would approach
Mm.
teaching Japanese. In fact, when Nihongo Master first kind of started, I had Brashir Sensei draft out some of the first original curriculum, so a little bit of her lives in Nihongo Master today.
Ah, that's very sweet. That's nice.
Mhm.
Right. So what inspired you to start at Nihongo Master? You mentioned a bit just now that's because you didn't really get enough resources online, right?
Yes, I mean, I used a variety of different tools when preparing for that trip to Japan. As I mentioned, like online dictionaries. I remember flying the plane, 18 hours to Japan with like 3 or 4 dictionaries and grammar books in my bag and just poring over them. But it was all different tools. And when I came back, I realized I wanted to continue learning the Japanese language. However, some of these tools were good in some ways and some of these tools were bad in another. And I'm an entrepreneur, I'm also a software engineer, and so I was like, you know what, let me start building a tool which will make it easier for me to learn. And while I was building that, I realized this is really useful. Maybe other people around the world can use this to help with their Japanese studies. And really, Nihongo Master first started as just an online dictionary. So,
Oh,
the way I was using Nihongo Master at the time was really just for word lookup very, very quickly on my phone. And, started incorporating some of the things that maybe online dictionaries weren't very good at doing. So, if any of the listeners out there are using Nihongo Master for the online dictionary, if you're looking up kanji, it can teach you the actual strokes and the stroke order, and that's very useful, and related words and example sentences. And I kind of wanted to bring in all those wonderful elements of other tools that were really valuable to me, but put it into one solid tool. And what was really exciting was once I did launch it, just again as an online dictionary, people started using it,
mm,
and it became very apparent that people wanted a better way to learn Japanese, and that's really how it started.
that's really cool. So it started off as an online dictionary and now expanded to something so much more and so useful for everyone that wants to learn Japanese.
Absolutely. So I'm really surprised at how much more value, how much more functionality the site has gained,
Mm.
and I use it to this day for studying Japanese. In fact, I'm getting ready. I know during this time we have a little bit of an issue with the JLPT test. Normally, it's taken in person, so we can't take in person Japanese language proficiency exams. But I'm hoping that by December they'll have some alternative way, because I am looking forward to just taking another JLPT test, this time the N4. I know more than that, but I've already have my N5. But using the same tools that everyone that uses Nihongo Master uses, I'm using that to just show that I can pass the next level just by using Nihongo Master.
That's really good. So Nihongo Master, all the tools on Nihongo Master, is it customizable? So for some people who want to learn maybe conversational Japanese or those who want to learn for JLPT, is it good for both?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I started looking at designing Nihongo Master, first off, I knew that I shouldn't write the lessons, right? So we brought on native Japanese instructors who have been fantastic, who have evolved the lessons into bite-sized lesson material. Maybe reading a lesson in 5 minutes will get you to learn a new grammar point, a handful of new vocabulary, and these lessons can be aimed at different situations. And then we have all the additional tools on top of the lessons, such as our drill system, which is based off of spaced repetition, which has been proven to be the best way to memorize new material such as vocabulary. And then we have, our practice writing sheets, which allow you to customize which kanji you want to learn, and print out sheets that actually help you to write and practice your kanji writing skills. And the same with our vocabulary drills, so people can create their own custom study list based off of what they're trying to learn. So whether you're trying to study for, say, an upcoming JLPT exam or a high school Japanese exam, or you're just trying to figure out the lyrics to that new Utada Hikaru song, then yeah, you can actually create your own custom study list, and and customize the learning to what you want to do. So I'm really happy about that.
That sounds amazing. I love things that are customizable. So like especially studying tools, if it customizes to you, I think that's like an appeal to it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what is your mission? What do you want? Who do you want to impact?
So, I mean, first off, that's a really, really good question. So, at first I was very selfish. I was just wanting to build a tool for myself to study the language. But when you start seeing other people use the tool, there's this sense of contribution to others that becomes overwhelming. You say, you know what, how can I build this tool to help people reach their goal? And now that we have a really fantastic team behind Nihongo Master, really our overarching mission is how can we bring this wonderful language to as many people as possible and empower them to start speaking it not only to each other but to native Japanese speakers. I mean, global communication is important, and even when my trip to Japan, many people, I was in the main Tokyo area, and so English was pretty well understood there and such, but there is a better relationship you build with someone the moment you start at least attempting to speak in their language. There's a sense of connection. And ultimately, communication is all about connection. And so, I'm almost tearing up here. Really, the mission here is help get people connected. And, we're talking about the Japanese language here, but, if we succeed with Japanese, then it's very possible for us to approach other languages and start branching out. Um, yes, we have, the mainstream languages that people kind of study around the world. You have French, you have German, you have Spanish, you have English, Japanese is kind of up there. But you also have other languages around the world which are becoming endangered, where you might actually have 100 people or less speaking that language. And this is just, a result of globalization of language, generations kind of dying out and their children being brought up in like a major English speaking or a major German speaking environment. And when I started learning more about this type of language die out, it kind of made me sad, because language is a good marker of the history of a people, their culture and how they are. With Japanese, you have honorifics, you have different ways of talking to different senior level of people. Of course, you have the male and female versions. And there's a lot of nuances to the language based off of what scenario you're in, or given the situation. And when a language dies out, it's gone. So ultimately, my goal with Nihongo Master is not just to teach Japanese, but eventually we'll branch out to other languages, and then hopefully start capturing some of the lessons and instruction around some of those endangered languages, so we can keep those languages alive, at least for a reference point. I know that seems far-fetched, but ultimately you have to shoot big, and that's ultimately the goal that I hope that we can achieve with our wonderful team here.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, language holds the culture as well, right? And the Japanese language is so rich in culture, don't you think?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what do you love about it? What do you love about the Japanese language and culture?
So that's I have a weird story. So when I'm a Disney fan. I love everything about Disney. It goes back to memories of my grandmother and me. And so obviously when I went to Japan, I definitely wanted to visit Tokyo Disneyland, and as well as Disney Sea. And I had a wonderful time at those parks, and watching kind of like the same rides that they have here, but experiencing it in Japan was kind of a flip. There's a couple of things that kind of stood out. One is I rode this ride called Star Tours. It's kind of a Star Wars based ride. And here in America, when people board the ride and the ride is going, there's drops, there's turns, there's twists, there's surprises, and everyone's screaming and yelling and waving their hands in the air and just shouting big time. And when I boarded the ride in Japan, in Tokyo Disneyland, everyone was very quiet. And then as the ride was going on, I was looking around and nobody was making any noise. It was very interesting. Nobody was shouting or screaming or yelling. And I wanted to, but of course I didn't want to stand out, so I kind of just tucked in and watched everyone else. And at the end of the ride, normally, here in America, people rush to get out so that they can go to the next thing. But uh, in Tokyo Disneyland, everyone waited until the ride was complete and the music stopped, and then everyone nicely, politely stood up and quietly exited. And that was a sign of, like, it was obvious everyone had a wonderful time. You could see everyone smiling and beaming and having a great experience, but there was like this underlying sense of respect and appreciation that I think is kind of unique in Japanese culture, that I thought it really stood out to me. Another funny story is my father is a bartender here in Las Vegas, and he's an example of someone who really tries to perfect their job. Every move that he made was very carefully done. Everything was well timed. And it was very interesting watching him because, many people in America, they want to do a good job, but they may not have that drive for perfection that my dad seemed to really approach. And it was very apparent that that was just a common theme in Japan. People very much want to drive to the next level of perfection. And that an example stood out where I went to Tokyo Disney Sea, and there is a giant Donald Duck boat. And I don't know, Azra, have you ever been to Disney Sea?
Yes, I have. I love Disney Sea. What do you
Oh,
think?
so
Do you
you
think it's better than Disneyland, or do you prefer
well,
Disneyland?
it's absolutely different. I love the theming. I think it's beautiful.
Mm,
Do you remember there was like there's a big Donald Duck boat.
which part of
So
Disney Sea?
yeah, so Donald Duck has a boat in Tokyo Disney Sea, and when you go in there, it's really a restaurant and a bar. And so
Oh,
I took this opportunity to go into Donald Duck's boat and go to the bar, and it was a very beautiful bar. And I sat down, and I ordered a drink with ice, and the bartender goes in the back, comes back with a block of ice in front of me, and starts chiseling it into a sphere right in front of me with precision. With You could tell that this was the thing that this person wanted to do right then and there. It seems like a silly story, but when you see somebody who is so passionate about doing a good job, it really sticks to you. And so that was just, during my 3 weeks in Japan, something that I noticed very much ingrained in the culture. Sure, I love the music. Sure, I love, the Japanese animation and the common things that Americans kind of think of in Japan, and the culture, the fashion, and everything like that. But deep down, I really do appreciate the culture of really doing a great job and seeking that perfection.
they put the 110% in everything that you do. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they like it or don't. It's their job and they just go for it, right?
Yes, and that's exactly what I try to do with my day to day, and so I think that resonates very well with me.
Yeah, that's a nice story. Those are nice stories. It's not silly, I don't think. So, what is your vision for Nihongo Master?
So we've brought on a great team to kind of boost it. Ezra, I'm first off, I'm very glad that you're part of the team. We've seen some wonderful blog articles come out to share elements of Japanese culture that I think you really brought to light, and I'm really excited about that. Really, what we want to do is put Nihongo Master into overdrive. We want to really start spreading the love of Japanese language and culture. So we're going to be doing that through completely rechanging the website, the look and feel, improving the tools, improving the community tools. So we're going to see a lot of that, but also over the next 5 years, we're going to see additional lessons, additional specialized learning tracks. So if you're specifically going there for tourism, or if you're going there for work, or you're going there to live, we want to make sure that you have a faster path for learning the more relevant lessons, the more relevant material. We recognize that there's a lot of people who our high school students or even middle school students, because here in the US at least, the Japanese language is finally starting to become more common of a desire for younger children to learn. So we want to start figuring out how we can address those younger audiences with even younger material. And then eventually, maybe after that, start looking at how can we support additional languages, as I mentioned before. So hold on tight, because it's going to be a fun ride.
Sounds amazing. Can't wait. I'm very excited to be part of this whole team and just being involved with everything and can feel the passion, feel the drive from everyone. It's amazing. It's been amazing.
Great.
So, what's been the most difficult part of your journey as an entrepreneur?
Ooh, as an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
so there's all these wonderful ideas in my head on how we can improve, but of course, there's limited resources. We have great team members, but obviously we can only do so much. Time is a big resource, and so we can only do so much. But I keep rambling about all these improvements to tools and things like that. We have to take our time. We have to do it correctly, and so really, it's just all of these great ideas and not enough time to execute them. So you mentioned, where do you see the company of 5 years? I hate waiting that long to see all these great things come into fruition, but I know it takes time. And I think that's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur, especially with Nihongo Master, because there's this big mission. There's this mission that I talked about: additional languages, endangered languages. How do we build a better web platform? How do we make it accessible to younger students? All these wonderful problems we want to solve, um, and just not enough time. So, I know that the team is working as hard as possible to introduce these changes as quickly as possible. I always just want to wake up the next day and have everything there, but it takes time, and I think that's the hardest part.
I see. But the journey is still one of the most rewarding parts as well, don't you think?
Yes, I mean, when you look back at it, so Nihongo Master has, started in late 2012, and the dictionary site and the progression of changes to the site, that's really exciting to look back at on and say, how did we get there? And we're a very small team, so to get the occasional email of saying that this is a fantastic tool, it's helped them in some way. That's pretty exciting.
Sounds good. What has been the most rewarding part of starting Nihongo Master?
Well, I did mention, occasionally I do get a wonderful email, and I've gotten emails from mothers talking about how their child found Nihongo Master, and they used it to learn Japanese, and they're so surprised, and that's really exciting. I've gotten emails of people saying that they used Nihongo Master to find a relationship. I think that's a common theme out there. People who have used Nihongo Master successfully to get a job in Japan, which is really exciting. And so when we talk back about what inspired to start Nihongo Master, or what is the mission, it's stories like that. It's stories where you hear that you enabled somebody to do something amazing, whether it's finding love or discover a new passion, or to find their dream job. I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it, and I just look forward to seeing more success stories as more people discover Nihongo Master and use it in their journey.
What's the one story that has stuck with you this whole time?
So yes, there. I mentioned earlier, a mother sent me an email in regards to her younger daughter, and really the email first started off as, "Hey, we're trying to figure out how to pay for Nihongo Master and things like that." And I noticed that. First off, I got them all set up correctly on their account, but I asked a little bit more about who is this, who's learning, and things like that. And we found that she was 14. She discovered Nihongo Master, and not only was she taking the lessons, but she was going the extra mile. She was talking to other people, learning the language on Nihongo Master, answering questions, rooting people, because with Nihongo Master, community is a big deal, and you can see other people's progress. And she was there, cheering people on. And so to find someone so passionate at such a young age, discover something new with something that we built, that's really rewarding, and I think that story really sticks with me.
Oh, that's really sweet. You mentioned about the community part of Nihongo Master. Can you talk a bit more about it? How is it important in learning the language?
So, I mean, that's a really good question. When I came back from Japan, I knew that I wanted to continue learning the language, but I looked at like why do people fail to learn a language, or why do they um, drop off very quickly? Somebody decides to learn a language, they work really hard at it for a week or two, and then they just drop off, right? And so part of it is repetition, right? You have to practice your language every day. And this means some form of immersion, right? That means writing post-its on your refrigerator, or on all of the things around your house with the Japanese words. But there's also the social element. You can't feel like you're isolated. You have to have like a team aspect. So, this is why sometimes you're more successful in a classroom in say high school, but then as an adult it's harder to learn a language because you're kind of on your own. So when I built Nihongo Master, I wanted to bring in some social aspects to really kind of create this dynamic of learning along with other people. So when you are on Nihongo Master, you can see what other people are doing, what points are they scoring. You have the ability to talk on their profile and kind of cheer them on. You could build teams and kind of work as study partners with each other. There is an online chat where you can actually chat in Japanese, and it will kind of translate it for people who may not know that level of Japanese. There's a lot of aspects to the community. There's obviously forums where people can talk back and forth. We want to find ways to improve those community tools because yes, immersion is important. Yes, quality of lessons are important. Yes, quality of tools are important. But if you're learning on your own, you're going to have a harder time. And so that's why we really wanted to try and bring community as a main focus for Nihongo Master.
You're 100% right. I feel like that is the thing that pushes you more. Like you're right, like lessons can be amazing, but if you don't have that kind of push from a community, it's not as um it's not as good, I would say, right?
Yeah, it's not as sticky. It won't stick with you, and you won't have that drive.
Yeah.
There's always something to be said about somebody pushing you and saying, "Hey, what's the next thing that you learned? What's the next thing you learned?" You don't want to let them down. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to a lighter topic. Just a bit lighter. What's your favorite Japanese food from your trip?
Well, I will say this from my trip. One of the most fascinating meals I had was a a sushi breakfast at the Tokyo Fish Market at 5 a.m. I woke up at like 4 a.m. in the morning, which is very hard when you have, say, jet lag, and traveled to the Tokyo Fish Market and had a wonderful sushi breakfast there. Of course, obviously the fish extremely fresh, very simple in presentation, everything like that. But that was fantastic. That was amazing, and that was one of the more memorable experiences of my trip to Japan. Now, fast forward to today, I have 4 kids. So really the question should be, what is their favorite Japanese food? Because I have to do that. Right. And so obviously they love ramen, and there's been an explosion of ramen restaurants here in Las Vegas. So there's plenty to choose from. But yeah, that apparently is where we have to go at least once a week now because they love it so much.
That sounds nice. What's your favorite type of ramen? There's so many different kinds of ramen.
Oh, there is. A tonkatsu broth, pork broth is fantastic, and there is some fantastic places here who that get their, the chashu just correct. But it varies. I tend to like spicy broth, because I tend to think of myself as a little spicy. But for the children, they need to go a little bit more mellow. So it varies. It also varies really based on the weather. So in Las Vegas, obviously we have very hot summers, but we also have very cold winters, and so it really depends on the weather what we might try, a more veggie broth or something more rich and hearty like a tonkatsu.
Sounds awesome. Have you ever tried making your own ramen at home?
Oh, I don't dare. One of these days, I would like to make homemade ramen noodles. I think that would be a wonderful exercise. Some people say they want to try making sushi at home. No, I want to go the extra mile. I want to make my own ramen noodles.
Oh, cool. Ramen noodles. That's a whole project.
It's a whole project, but like I mentioned in Japanese culture, there's this always, you keep improving for this ideal sense of perfection. Even though perfection is unattainable, you keep moving forward. And I think that would be an interesting project to just really start diving into that art. But I also want to know if ramen noodles is there's things in the air, the environment that kind of change the taste, texture of ramen noodles. It's an art form. I remember I went to the ramen museum in Japan, which was fascinating, and you get all these different styles from all around Japan, and every restaurant has their own style of noodles. So I think it's one of those mysterious dark arts that I just got to try at least once.
Yeah. What about sushi? Have you ever tried making sushi at home?
I haven't, just because there's so many great sushi restaurants here, which is surprising, right? We live in a desert, so we can't get the freshest fish here, but there's plenty of sushi restaurants here to try out. But I'll tell you this: if I really want to go all out on sushi, I can't wait to go to Japan again and get back to that fish market.
Oh, sushi is amazing. Like I can't get enough. Um, when you had your trip here, what are some of the few words or phrases that you found interesting or from your
Well,
studies?
and I mentioned it earlier in regards to differences of languages. In Japan, honorifics and social status play a very important part in dialogue. I think we know of that. In fact, I think we have a blog article um, about 10 ways to say thank you. In fact, there's numerous ways to say thank you in Japanese, but it really does depend on who you're talking to, or if it's really just a friend. And it's crazy how not only is the point of saying thank you, but also your body language in saying thank you, whether it's a polite bow or a deeper bow, depending on who you're talking to. So whether it's a simple arigato or domo for casual, or arigato gozaimasu or domo arigato gozaimasu, it's very interesting, those nuances. And it's one of those things that aren't really taught very often or very well in some of the other online language learning tools. Sometimes you lose that sense of cultural significance, and Japanese, there's a lot of cultural significance in the language, and just the simple phrase "thank you" can be so different. And I think that's really what was striking to me when I started studying the language.
Yeah, I think in Japanese there's so many ways to say one thing, and even one word can have so many different sort of like meaning to it, and like the
Abs-
significance. Yeah,
Totally.
and I think that's beautiful. The language is just so beautiful.
Oh yes, yes. As opposed to other languages, which might sound very rocky and harsh. Sometimes Germanic, German language, sounds sometimes a little harsh to the ear. Sometimes that's a common thing that you might hear. With Japanese, there tends to be a more fluid kind of cadence with the language, and I think it's very pleasing to the ears as well.
It all ties back to their culture, the very polite, gentle culture. I feel like, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. It's very nice to hear all your thoughts and opinions and stories. Do you have any last final thoughts that you want to add in?
Uh, I mean, yes, obviously Nihongo Master is one of various tools to learn Japanese, and hopefully it is a tool that the listeners find interesting and use, obviously. But if you don't learn from Nihongo Master, do take the opportunity to maybe pick up some Japanese music or Japanese animation and really listen to the language. And even if you don't understand the words, like back in high school when I was listening to Japanese music or listening to animation, I didn't know the words. There's emotion behind it. There's emotion behind it. And so listen to the emotion, and maybe that will make you really want to take the next step in learning the language. And I want to kind of leave it with that.
That sounds nice. Sounds beautiful. How can people get in contact with you?
So I'm readily available. So you can reach me. My email address is taylor@nihongomaster.com. I try to read every email that comes in. So whether it's a comment or suggestion about the site or something that you want to learn, or maybe even a success story, I want to hear from you. So please do reach out.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. It's amazing hearing from you. And thank you for being on the show.
No, Azra, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to future podcast episodes.
I'm very excited for the future ones as well. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to hear from Taylor, the founder of Nihongo Master. If you're inspired to pick up some more Japanese for yourself, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the official website to learn more. Thank you so much for listening in. I'm looking forward to the next one. I hope you'll join me then as well. Mata ne!